Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatore. So a question that came up in comments, in fact this morning I believe, was regarding spiked pommels. And the question came up, we know that in longsword and Langsmesser and these other medieval sources, and indeed later treatises as well, in the Renaissance and post-Renaissance periods, that pommels were used to strike with, giving us the word pommel probably. And the question came up, are there any historical examples of spiked pommels? And the simple answer is yes, there's actually quite a lot of examples. And in the medieval period we know that it was occasionally done, or certainly it's shown in art. And we all know that in the medieval period, in the knightly combat arts, particularly in Germany, they did like to end their opponents rightly with their pommels, and sometimes that meant having a spiked pommel. And lo and behold, I have here the excellent, I can't pronounce their surnames fantastically, but Walczak, that's my friend Bart in Poland, and Zabinski, Grzegorz Zabinski, how's my Polish pronunciation? I think that was pretty good, published this book on Codex Wallerstein. You don't need to buy the book to see the pictures, you can indeed go and see the images of Codex Wallerstein on Wiktor now, for example. So it's Codex Wallerstein, we would say it in English, but Wallerstein I guess it is in German, and it is a German source, and in there we have armoured fighting. Now a codex, I should just mention, a codex means an assemblage of bits of things to make a book. So the bits of Codex Wallerstein aren't all originally associated with each other. There's an earlier bit and there's a later bit, and they've been put together into one book, possibly I believe by Paulus Hector Mayer, who is a collector. But anyway, I'll leave that for another video. But here we go, guys. There is spiky pommel, and another spiky pommel, and another spiky pommel, and another spiky pommel. And these guys obviously are fighting in armour, and therefore they're wanting to have a weapon which is more specialised for fighting in armour. In actual fact, as most of you will know, when people fight in armour with longswords, they spend a lot of the time gripping the blade, either with one hand or two. This person, you can see, has got one hand on the hilt, one hand on the blade. This person's got both hands on the blade, and they're doing something that's called a murder strike or something like that, Mordschlag I believe, and the other person is doing more conventional half-swording. And in fact there are swords, there are surviving swords, which actually have a special blunt area in the middle of the blade. This is mentioned by Filippo Vardi in his treatise of 1483 to 1485, but there is also a surviving example of a sword like that in the Rüstkammer in Vienna, the big armoury in Vienna. So they definitely did exist, they weren't just in artwork. And in fact I do know of a longsword-like sword. It's got more of a blade like an estoc actually, which has a head which is somewhat like a mace on it, and that's actually in Wawel Castle in Krakow in Poland. I believe I was one of the first HEMA people to notice that sword then, but since then lots of people have seen it, and I think you can find, if you search for Wawel Castle sword, you might be able to find pictures of it online. But anyway, so here we go, Codex Wallerstein, pointy ended pommels, and you'll notice that it has points for striking at the side, like a mace or a warhammer, and a point at the end, of course. And if we just go back a page, there we go, we can see there a pommel being used to end someone rightly, and they're literally using the sword pretty much like a sledgehammer to someone's head. And again there we've got more examples of grappling, use of the rondel dagger into a helmet, and half-swording, and so on and so forth. So that is what armoured fighting looked like, or what it was supposed to look like in the medieval period as far as the masters were concerned. I should also mention before I wrap this up that spikes and offensive bits on pommels goes right the way through history as well. It goes into later periods, and in actual fact there are rapiers. I know of at least one antique rapier in a collection, I can't remember which collection it's in right now, it could be the Metropolitan Museum, which actually has a blade projecting out of the pommel end like a dagger blade. So that was done in the sort of era of rapiers, so 16th, 17th century, and indeed even if we go into the 18th and 19th century, not necessarily on swords very often. I can't think of, well, except for Indian swords. We see Indian swords sometimes have a projecting point on the pommel, but on pistols, believe it or not. And if I just grab, as we've spoken about before, pistols can be quite good things for clobbering people with. Once you've used them to shoot and you can't shoot with them anymore, you may as well use them as a club. And in the 18th and 19th century, the butt of the pistol was often used to strike with, and I have indeed seen a revolver, a 19th century revolver, with a great big tomahawk-like spike created on the butt of the grip. So indeed, you could certainly turn even one of these into a hand weapon, and that's pretty much the same idea as having a spike on the pommel of your sword. So there we go, folks. We did have spiky pommels in the medieval period and all the way through to World War I at least, if not even modern times. Cheers, folks. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and feel free to follow us on Facebook.